But we're talking today the next generation of security leaders. So we've heard some really quite inspiring and thought-provoking comments around leadership. But actually, what does 2035 look like? I talk about the turbulent, I've nicked this obviously, turbulent, uncertain, novel and ambiguous environment with threats accelerating and being accessed by groups and coalitions who previously wouldn't have enjoyed that sort of capability. I think when you look back to 2015 or so, you could probably say we would have anticipated many of the threats and the risks, but not necessarily predicted the impacts. So our future leadership, whilst we may still be able to anticipate, our future leadership being able, through the foresights as well, to understand, manage with our businesses to communicate in their language becomes a real challenge. And so today on the panel, we've got people who are just starting their working careers, just starting their careers in security. So they will definitely have views on their experience of our leadership, the barriers that they have faced, the opportunities that they've exploited, some of the skills gaps that they may see, leadership culture and organisational culture, their views on us as a profession, and also how we integrate modern ways of working. So I'll start with Amelia first, and you know, security hasn't always enjoyed a sort of a clear, accessible pathway, and there's often been barriers if you don't come from a armed forces or law enforcement background. So could you just expand on how you found your way into the profession and what you think needs to evolve in order to attract and retain the next generation of leaders?
Yeah, sure. So I'm currently a graduate security consultant at Bureau Happold, but I didn't think I would end up there. I actually grew up with an interest in crime and security. So I applied to the UCL degree of Security and Crime Science, and I didn't really know where I'd end up with that. And while I was in my second year, I was given the opportunity to apply for an internship at City of London Police, where I actually did an internship with their DOCO, their Design Out Crime Officer. And this was kind of the first chance I had to actually be introduced to the world of physical security. I hadn't really heard much about it, even though my degree was in crime and security. I hadn't heard much about physical security and its applications. So when I was in that internship, I learned a lot. And I realized that was something I wanted to do in my career. So going into my third year of uni, I went to a careers fair at UCL, where there were a couple of companies, including Bureau Happold, who sort of did a presentation explaining what they do in their roles and in their jobs. And I thought, oh, I really want to do that. So I applied through the normal routes, had an interview and got in. But what I want to emphasize is that even though for my first couple of years, I was doing a degree in crime and security, I had no idea that any of these jobs existed. So I think it was really important that Bureau Happold and other companies as well came to UCL to advertise what they did to all the young people there, to let them know this is what we do. And I think that was really important for me to sort of think that actually I want to do that as a career. And then on your second point of your question, how to retain us, I think it's really important to give young people a voice, as we have today, because when we're given a voice, we feel valued and we feel like we can give our opinion, and it will allow us to sort of give our fresh new perspectives on things, which I think are really needed in this day and age, with everything constantly evolving. So I think involve us in all the big decisions and give us a voice and made us feel heard.
Thanks. And James, what's your experience?
So for me, coming in from an engineering background, and the way that I came into this space was just by looking at various jobs, opportunities available to me, and my background is actually in aerospace engineering. So I was looking mainly in the more structural side of engineering. And just by chance, I came across a job application about physical security, design of systems, and so on. And I thought, well, that sounds quite interesting, thinking like a criminal trying to break into banks and so on. That's something that I think is quite interesting. So I applied and managed to get in, and sort of similar to what Amelia said is that it was definitely not a world that I thought was out there, to be honest, and it was purely by chance that I came across the job application. So I think a big part of it is that going to university, speaking to students, saying that this is a career path available, and it is incredibly interesting. It's an incredibly interesting space. There's some really fantastic technology, some of which is here today that I can't wait to go and actually have a look at and get my hands on. And so I think that's really important, essentially, just to show that the space is out here, and there's a lot of interest, I think, in young people if they just knew about it.
I mean, some interesting thoughts there, and I think it leads quite nicely into, you've got entry, but then you've got to consider development. And I'm really interested, and I'll pose this to you, Olivia, in terms of the skills and experience that have most accelerated your development to date, and how should our profession evolve its approach to training and mentorship to ensure that we optimise potential?
To answer the first part of your question, I think exposure has really accelerated my development. I've only been in the post since September, so having the opportunity to be able to attend conferences like these and have someone like Rick take a chance on all of us and be able to speak to the leaders of today is a very exciting experience. I think secondly, there also needs to be a program that's codified that enhances both soft skills, but also skills such as leadership and teamwork. For example, I'm currently on the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority graduate scheme, and part of this is that every 3 months we all meet as a cohort and we have skill sessions where we develop leadership or commercial acumen or try and improve our financial literacy, which definitely helps. And I think the third part is being curious. I personally really like understanding how things work, and I've been lucky enough that there's been people throughout the organisation who are willing to sit down with me and have a chat about how does law impact security, or how does commercial contracts come into play, how does the business actually function. And to answer the second part of your question about how the industry needs to change, I think there needs to be a focus on professionalisation. Sometimes coming into the industry, particularly security, but specifically nuclear security, it's very unclear about how you can progress, what skills and experience you need to get that next step, and I think that needs to be laid out. And additionally, part of this should be a mentorship program. So this is both mentorship from the top down, but also potentially thinking about reverse mentorship. Is there something that the people who've entered your profession are seeing that you might be missing, or is there something that you can learn from them? And the third part is also allowing the young professionals or career changers or career starters to be able to gain training outside of leadership, so maybe in financial literacy, or allowing them to do a project management qualification, or maybe even back them to go through business school, because that will fundamentally make them better security leaders and be able to attract and retain that talent.
Yeah, I think most of us would agree that if you don't have some of those wider skills, your ability to talk to the organisation in languages that it will understand will be a challenge, and will continue to talk security tech, which they don't want to listen to. So I think that sort of leads on into a sort of a discussion, I suppose, around sort of technology, and we're already sort of recognising it and discussing the explosion of digital technologies, artificial intelligence, immersive simulation, digital twins, etc. You know, are they going to empower or hinder the next generation of leaders, and how can we prepare for these and harness the opportunities that they present? James, what are your views on that?
I think, especially with the explosion of AI tools that we're seeing at the moment, I think a big part of that is looking to incorporate it into our way of working. I know that I've started trying to incorporate a co-pilot into some of my everyday tasks in terms of, is it a hindrance or does it provide a benefit? I think there potentially could be a hindrance if there's a lack of understanding, and I think it's using the tools in the correct fashion, understanding where they're appropriate to be implemented. From the security perspective, looking at some of the clients that we're working with, a lot of the time they're looking to see how can we use technology to reduce the number of sort of missed items by an operator, that they don't lose their concentration and their focus. But at its core, you still have that human operator who are utilizing those tools.
Yeah. And Aaron, what's your view on that?
I think the technology that we talk about today, especially when it comes to AI and digital twins, is mostly a good thing. It's one of the reasons we talk about it so much. You can implement it in a lot of different ways, and let's take the example of a hammer, for example. A hammer can be shaped in different ways to produce different types of outputs. There's a surprising amount of careers actually that might use one. Say you're a sculptor, a surgeon, carpenter, whatever. And you need them. You need them in order to do your job right. In some professions, you absolutely need them, but in some you don't. And integrating them everywhere is definitely not a good idea, because you need to know what it is that you're setting out to do in the first place, and your mission and vision have to be set in stone. They have to be concrete in your mind as well. And just going with the latest fad isn't going to help facilitate that product delivery. At the same time, people need to be educated on how to use them, right? Because a hammer, you can use it to smash somebody's head, and you can use it to nail some hammers. And AI, being new as it is, people need to be educated about it. They need to learn not to fear it, learn also not to be over-reliant on it, to use it as a tool, because that's what it is. It's not here to replace anything that it cannot replace, and using it that way is going to lead to poor performance and poor outputs. You teach people how to use them right, you're going to get good outputs.
I'll stay with you, Aaron, and probably just pull the thread a little bit further. So it's easy to talk technology, and I absolutely get some technology is viewed as either good or fundamentally evil. But security, I believe, is fundamentally about people, and it's how we engage with them, how we protect them, lead them, and understand them. How do we ensure that human side of security, of security leadership, the empathy, the ethics, the communication, remains relevant in a rapidly changing environment that is increasingly leaning on data and automation and gen or agentic AI? How do we bring that human dimension forward?
It's a good question. It's a complex question. To begin with, I think that entropy takes care of at least half of that problem, because with security being, as you said, fundamentally about people, you will always default back to those soft skills at some point. If you ignore them for too long, it might be when it's too late, and if not, then great. A good way to make sure that we keep humans in the equation is to talk about it like we're doing now, is to be conscious of the fact that you can't factor people out and replace them with technology when security will be at some point about humans. Is you can create an AI to fight another AI. You got one defending and one attacking, stealing data, so no humans yet. But somebody's written that AI, and somebody's sitting behind wanting to use that data he's about to steal, and it always comes back to people at some point, whether it's customers, whether it's attackers, whether it's victims, defenders. And so being conscious of that fact then allows us to integrate it properly into what it is that we do, how we train our people, the sort of attention that we give to it. And I think there's been a gap in this area lately. Is if you look at security over the past few decades, people have had the tendency to look at ex-military, ex-police as being more legitimate than other security providers, such as who we are, right? I'm more of an academic than a soldier. And that has come with the downside of ignoring soft skills for a while. And now the entropy that I started my answer with has circled back around, and now we're talking about it again because we've noticed that shortage, because we'll always notice it at some point, dealing with people at every step of the way, because that's what our industry relies on. That's what it revolves around. We're here to protect people against other people.
And staying with that theme, and I think it's an important one. We've unpacked a little bit around communication. We've spoken a little bit about leadership. I've got a view that leadership, mirroring what Bill Slim said, who commanded the 14th Army, that leadership's very personal. He said leadership is just plain you. Do you think that the way that we both lead and communicate is effective in a multi-generational environment? Because I have got a very obvious way of communicating. I think I'm effective, and there are people in the audience who've worked with me before who have had to stop me and go, what do you actually mean? What do you actually want? You've drawn a picture up there that I've got no idea what it is at all. So in terms of leadership and communication across that sort of spectrum, what works, what doesn't work? This is one we didn't really rehearse, everybody, so let's just go with it and riff off each other. So Olivia, shall I start with you?
I think what works is being open to being challenged. I find it particularly helpful when you have a boss or a manager who you can say, actually, what does this acronym mean? What does this concept mean? I don't understand your argument here. Could you please explain it? And so having that willingness and that psychological safety to be able to put your hand up and say, actually, I don't understand or I disagree with you, is something that is needed in leadership, and hopefully everyone in the room develops that within their teams already.
I think continuing on from that as well, it's also a point to say that coming in as new grads or early careers individuals, you want to obviously impress, you want to show that you really sort of are enthusiastic about the role and that you really want to develop. And I think as part of that is creating that safe space to partially say that I don't understand something, but also to query why are we doing it this way. Sometimes when the answer comes back as well, that's just because that's how we do it. And really then begin to pull on that thread to go, okay, well at its core, is this the most efficient way we can be doing it? Are there better options outside of just, well, it's what everyone knows, and so it works for us? I think that's also something to consider as well.
I think as well, something that I really respect in leadership is when they kind of include the juniors in sort of all of the processes. So I've worked under different leaders who just think that the juniors are there to just do their job, get on with it. They don't need to know about the processes going on behind the scenes. But when I've been involved in the behind the scenes processes, the things that are not necessarily my job, but they're my boss's job, it's really interesting to see what happens. And it will mean that when I eventually step up and become my boss's level, that I actually already have a foundation of knowledge of how to do these behind the scenes processes.
And we started off, and we've got the question there, 2035 or beyond 2035. From each of you very quickly, what do you think, as we look into that epoch, what will be the big challenge that you will face, and what do you need to do in order to address that when you arrive there? James, do you want to start?
Sure, I think in many ways when we look back sort of 10, 15 years, but even further, in many aspects, human beings, the world that we inhabit does change, technology that we use changes, but at our core I think human beings don't change that much in sort of what we want and so on. So I think with that in mind, the key skill set really going forward is just that ability to communicate and discuss and disagree with people, and I think that's a big part of the security role, is we're not just engaging with a security stakeholder. We've seen already today speaking about the business impacts and all the various stakeholders that inevitably the security space sort of begins to bleed into. The high importance is really on that communication capability, having those difficult discussions which no one likes to have, but can be very fruitful with their outcomes. So I think it's, as Aaron said, sort of the soft skills and growing those capabilities and personal attributes in sort of more junior members of staff. So when it does become time for them to step up, they already have that sort of runway up to that point, rather than just being, okay, now you're promoted, now go manage someone, and you actually haven't ever done that before.
And we're close to time, so really briefly, Amelia.
Yeah, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I think obviously the physical and cyber convergence is going to be so important. And my point I wanted to get across was upskill the junior staff. They already have, well, in my case, I have a very good foundation of knowledge in physical security, but not so strong in cyber. So I need to be given the opportunity to be upskilled in both cyber and physical, I think.
I think in a succinct sentence, probably workforce management. As has been touched on in previous panels, there is a skills shortage and a aging workforce. So it's imperative that the security industry raises its profile so that more people are attracted to it, maybe outside of ex-police, ex-military, but those who are seeking to change careers or are graduates like ourselves or students.
Yeah, I agree with that point. And I think what we need to do is definitely upscale the workforce, focus more on the youth for the time being. But we also have to make it a multi-generational industry, because at the moment, and we were talking about this before coming up on stage, is there is a gap. It's like there's people like us in the workplace, 20, maybe early 30s, and then there's the gap, and then you got people in their 50s, 60s. And in order to have an effective workforce, you do need people at all levels, different backgrounds, different ages, and they all need to be educated about what everybody else is doing, because if the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing, how can you have an effective organization, right? And that also raises respect, that also bridges the gap between physical and cyber, because once a worker knows how hard somebody in IT works to keep them safe, then they might think twice about propping that fire escape door with a fire extinguisher because they want to have a smoke break and circumvent the card scanning. And so, in one short answer, education and upscaling, definitely.
So that's us complete. I think I'll ask you to thank the panelists shortly. I think the thing that really is impressive is I think it's their first time up on stage in a professional environment like this. I know there were some nerves prior to getting up on the stage. That hasn't shone through at all. And I think they're here for the day, and I really have encouraged them to reach out and meet as many of you as possible, and likewise. But I think they've done really well for their first professional engagement. So if you would join me in thanking the panel.